thanks for coming along today. I just wanted to come on and advise a couple of things specifically regarding questions around directors' payments, because there's been a lot of confusion and a lot of people have been calling Service New South Wales and getting completely different answers. And I want to explain to you why that's been happening and why you need to understand that your scenario is not going to be exactly the same as everybody else's. So everyone is operating differently and they will have different cases. But what I'm actually finding that the biggest issue today is actually not to do with that. It's the fact that the questions we're asking are not the same. For instance, we had a meeting yesterday. So I am one of the Business Connect advisors. We had a meeting yesterday with New South Wales Treasury, which, don't worry, I let rip. I'm incredibly frustrated on behalf of my clients at the uncertainty out there. So I let that rip and found out a few interesting things yesterday. And then today I've spoken with a guy from one of my really good contacts at Service New South Wales, who's quite high up. And I spoke with him today and it ended up in a heated discussion because he couldn't see that his answer to me was not a great answer. And I'm going to go through why that is. So I kind of hope he watches this video so he understands why I was getting frustrated at him, because it really comes down to the questions you're asking, but you can't answer the right question if you don't know what the question needs to be. And that's where there's a massive issue. So feel free to ask questions as we go. Now, I'm just going to give you this little bit of background first about understanding how people think and why everyone's getting different answers when they think they're asking the same question and they're just not. So I'm just going to get through that first, and then we're going to look at the actual specific examples for all the director cases, and we'll hopefully cover all your situations off. This is what's going on. So just to let you know, background disclaimer, the information presented to you today is generic and may not apply to you. I am not a financial advisor. I am not working for Service New South Wales. So please make sure after you hear this that you go away and you speak to Service New South Wales and your accountant about your scenario. But hopefully what I'm doing today is giving you enough clarity so that you can get the correct answer for your situation, because you know exactly what to ask for and how to frame it to make sure you're getting the right question and answer happening. So who am I? I'm Jane Tweedy. I am a business owner myself. I have FAQ business training and a few other businesses. I'm also a business advisor with the New South Wales Government Business Connect program. And we've been under clear instruction in that program to direct people to Service New South Wales, which obviously has been incredibly frustrating when we're deflecting them to somebody that is not picking up the phone, is not answering the questions the way that you want them answered, and is generally just not answering anything out there. I understand that frustration. On the flip side, though, this stuff has gone through incredibly quickly. You think about when you put in a major project or a major system, it takes time to get things in. This is done rushed. It's going to have mistakes. It's going to have errors. It's going to have situations they just didn't think about. So please, as much as we can be, try and be patient. I know people are in a world of hurt. I was speaking to a lady today, and because of something she did, it potentially means that she loses $20,000. So I understand what you're going through, but we need to kind of at least look for the other side. And one thing I will say to you, as much as possible, although I know, like I said, I did have a bit of an argument with Service New South Wales this morning, do try to, as much as possible, be nice to the people on the phone. They are not the ones causing the problem. So please don't have a go at them. Be really nice to them, because they're having a really shitty time too. So, they're doing their best. So the first thing I just want to cover, why are people getting different answers to the same question? So we're going to step away from this topic of directors first, when you might think, why the hell am I doing this? But I want you to understand this. So why do people get different answers to the same question? Honestly, it's because we all think differently. What we see is different. What we hear is different. What we feel is different. We are different people. We have different feelings. We have different thinking patterns. And one thing I've been doing at the moment is a thing called whole brain thinking. And it leads to a thing called the HBDI profile. And basically what whole brain thinking is saying there's 4 quadrants of the brain that we think with: our analytical and logical mind, our big picture entrepreneurial mind. And let's face it, a lot of entrepreneurs are going to be in that space. We have the red feeling people side. And then we have the green, which is the organized planning and detailed side. Now, you might be able to switch around all these things, and you may do. But what I'm finding is that this is becoming really apparent And in the discussion I had today with Service New South Wales, it was very obvious that I thought I'd asked the right question and he thought I'd asked a completely different question, and therefore we got a completely different answer. And I'm going to go through that scenario in a second. So I want to show you an example. If I bring up this image of capsicums, and I ask you, what do you see in this picture, or what do you not see in this picture? Now, everybody's going to answer this different. So somebody might say, oh, it's a graphic of a capsicum. Some might say, oh, that's a very red capsicum. Some might say there's two capsicums. Some might say the capsicum's floating in the air. Some might say, whatever. But the key thing I might have wanted to know from you was that there was a shadow under the capsicum. Okay, well, if you don't know that that's what I want to know, you're not going to tell me that. Most people would not say that as a response to that picture. They would say all these other things about it. There's two red capsicums. The red capsicums look like they're floating in the air or whatever. They're on a plain background. They might give me that information, but they're unlikely to tell me about the shadow. What I'm finding from Service New South Wales today is that the questions you're asking is why you're getting different answers. So, for instance, when I spoke to Service New South Wales this morning, I said, I just want an answer to this specific question. Can you just tell me? Because yesterday I had people telling me that they'd had yes, no, and maybe answers, and then no's that changed to yes when they had further conversation, or they pushed it further and it went escalated. Now, the reason for that is because of this issue. So, for instance, I said to the guy this morning, I said, okay, if I'm a director employee of a business that's heavily impacted, like a hairdresser, like she said, a beautician, can I get the COVID disaster payment? That was what I asked him. I thought that was pretty self-explanatory and pretty detailed, okay? I've said I'm a director. I said I'm an employee, okay? I said, that they're in an industry that's heavily impacted. I thought that would be enough to get the answer to the question. The answer I received was no, okay? Then he proceeded to carry on and tell me about, individuals can get COVID disaster payment, i.e. other individuals can get COVID disaster payments, blah, blah. And I went, yeah, but wait a minute. If that hairdresser or that beautician is the owner of the business, but they're also an employee in the business, aren't they entitled as a separate legal entity employee to get the money? And he's like, well, yeah, if they've lost more than 20 hours, then they can get the money. And I'm like, okay, so now you're saying yes, because you just said really adamantly before no. And he was going, well, yeah, but that's a different question. I'm like, thinking, no, it's not. You haven't asked me the extra details. Did the person lose 20 hours or not? So the thing is, if they don't ask you those questions, you're not thinking necessarily to tell them all these extra facts. Or you may not have actually instigated these extra bits and pieces, which you would if you knew that that was an issue. So what you basically need to say to get the right answer to the question is, I'm a director who is also employed by the hairdressing, construction, whatever business as that I have as a company. Okay, so you'll be clear it's a company and have been forced to close. I'm still doing some operational work, so I'm still working. Clearly you're on the phone to Service New South Wales, you're working, but you have been stood down for at least 20 hours, or you've lost at least 20 hours worth of work. Am I entitled to CDP, the COVID disaster payment? Then the answer to that question is yes, because as an employee of that business who's lost over 20 hours work, you are entitled to claim the COVID disaster payment as the director of a company that's also an employee, okay? So this is where the scenarios are different, and therefore you get different results. So I'm going to go through the scenarios because this discussion led me to going, okay, I get why some people got yes, no, and maybe now. So we're going to go through the different scenarios. Now, I wanted to focus this on the directors, okay? So I'm just going to touch on sole traders very briefly. I'll come back to sole traders and questions if anyone's got any. I just want to raise that first, and then we'll focus on directors, okay? So as sole traders, you and your business are the same legal entity, okay? You can't extract the two. You're the same thing. So therefore, you can claim for one of either the micro business grant if you're eligible, the JobSaver and COVID business grant if you're eligible, so the under 75, over 75,000 thing, or the COVID disaster payment from Services Australia, okay? You cannot claim for both. If you claim a business support payment, you cannot claim the other. So that's whether you're claiming the other as a casual employee somewhere else, whatever, you cannot claim it in your business. Now, your business has to be your primary source of income. So for some people, the business is still the primary source of income, but they are a casual employee like somewhere else and have been stood down. So they therefore have the choice. If you were a permanent part-time employee somewhere else, if you were a full-time employee, it's the same sort of rules as last year. You won't be able to claim it for the business, okay? But regardless of employing or not, you have to make a call, one or the other. Now, what I was told yesterday at the meeting we had yesterday with New South Wales Treasury was something I was very disturbed to hear, was they were basically saying you couldn't switch. You couldn't say, I've done COVID disaster payment because I had to feed my family. I want to switch over now to do the micro business grant or the grant and JobSaver. They were saying as a matter of policy, you couldn't do that. I said that's ridiculous and gave them a scenario. So one of my clients, for instance, she claimed the first 3 weeks, the $1,800 from the first 3 weeks of the $600 a week payments, because she was in a shit situation. She needs to feed her family. Okay. So she claimed that. By claiming that, and that was the only thing that was available when she was claiming that, remember, once the other information came out, she would be far better off with the other things because she's over 75,000. She could claim $15,000 from the grant because she was over 70% down, and she could claim JobSaver as well at a higher level than what she's getting on the government COVID disaster payment. So the problem is technically she's not allowed to switch. Now, Services Australia, if you look on their thing, on their payment thing, it says it refers to a period. So it says you can't claim the business support payment and the COVID disaster payment at the same time. We all know that. We know you can't double dip. So that's fine for a sole trader. But you should be able to switch. And that's not telling you can't switch. So that one there, as a matter of policy, they've said that, but they've also acknowledged that that's a really bad situation and that they will look at getting the policy changed so you can change that. On the flip side, a lot of people are going to just do it anyway. And to be honest, because Services Australia and Service New South Wales are federal and state, they don't talk to each other. It's not going to come out for a long time, right? So that's going to be a bit of an issue. So Elisa's asking, what if you're a director of a business, but you do not get a wage? Can you get JobSaver? When JobKeeper was in place, we were entitled to that payment. So I'm going to talk about that in a second. Okay. So this was just the sole traders. So sole traders, that's it for you guys. Okay. So we're going to come back to that. If you've got any questions, we'll come back to that. But like I said, I want to focus on the directors of the company because this is where people were getting completely different answers, whereas sole trader was kind of clear cut. It's either one or the other, and that's it. That's the way it is at the moment. Okay, so directors of a company. You and your business are different legal entities. Okay, so Jane Tweedy is one legal entity. FAQ Business Pty Limited is a completely different legal entity. Okay, for a start, we have two legal entities. So that's different from sole traders. Okay. The second thing we look at is how are you paid for by your business? And this comes to your question, Elisa. So how are you paid by your business? So as a company, remember we're talking about directors of the company here. So as a company, are you paid as an employee? As in you get regular pay, it goes through the payroll system, you pay PAYG on it, you do super on it, and you report it through STP, okay? And it then shows up in your BAS statement. If you are doing that, you are an employee of your company. Okay, so you are definitely an employee. Therefore, we can look at you as a person that's an employee and you as a director of a company. The company will be able to claim for business payments, potentially. If you are paying yourself through other means, for instance, you are paying yourself dividends, you are not paying yourself salary, you will not be eligible for COVID disaster payments because you are not an employee. Okay, you are not an employee, you can't claim COVID disaster payments. So in that case, Elisa, if you're a director of your business, as in a director of a company, I'm just gonna make sure we use the right words here, director of a company, and you don't get a wage because you don't take it for whatever reason, you just get dividends whenever, then you are not entitled to COVID disaster payment, okay? Because you haven't lost anything. However, if you could claim the micro grant, or you could claim the JobSaver grant, okay? If you're a non-employing business, you'll get the lowest amount that they talk about on each of them. If you're an employing business, then on the JobSaver, you'll get that 40% of the wages figure, okay? Which we can talk about separately soon. So if you are an employee of the company, the next question is, are you paying yourself? So some people have still been paying themselves full wages, okay? If you're paying yourself full wages, you can't claim the COVID disaster payment because you haven't lost any hours. You've paid yourself your full wage, okay? If, however, you've stopped paying yourself completely, clearly you've cut hours for yourself, okay? So what ideally you need to do, just to make sure that this is crystal clear, is that you write yourself a little letter, as you would for any other employee, and you say, "Dear Jane, you are stood down, and I only want you to work 16 hours a week and 20 hours a week or 22 hours a week or whatever. We are not paying you anymore. Please stand down." If you do that, that employee, yourself, Jane can go and claim COVID disaster payment if she is eligible, okay? So that means she's lost more than 20 hours. She can go claim that. She is me. Under FAQ Business Pty Limited, I can then apply for any relevant payment. So if I'm over 75,000 and I was affected in the first 3 weeks, I can check all the criteria for the grant, the business grant, and go, yep, I meet those criteria. I can apply for it. And then after week 3, from week 4 on, I can apply for JobSaver. If you're paying yourself, that's what you need to do. So can I stress, if you are not cutting your wage, you won't be able to claim the COVID disaster payment. So this is why some people are getting the yes, no, maybe answers. So they're getting the yes answer if they give the full information. My business is shut down. I'm reduced my hours by over 20. I'm stopped paying myself, blah, blah, blah. Then you can claim under COVID disaster payment and claim the business support stuff from Services New South Wales at the same time. There is one further but though. You can't claim that money if you don't have additional things to spend it on. So when you look at the grant money that's coming out, the grant and JobSaver, they talk about the BAS, 40% of the BAS. So JobSaver talks about 40% of BAS. So with the JobSaver being 40% of BAS, it's the 40% of the pre-COVID BAS. So for instance, your March BAS. So if your March BAS, if you do quarterly BAS, your March quarter BAS, it will be 40% of the wages paid for that quarter, the average weekly wage. So that's what you're looking at for your payments. So some people are getting confused with the idea of headcount and 40% of wages. They're thinking they still have to pay their employees. No, you don't. You can stand down your employees. If you're closed, if you're a hairdresser, if you were, construction worker the last weeks, you could have stood down your employees and paid them nothing, as long as they're still on the books. So this is what the headcount means. They must be on the books. You can't terminate them. You can't get rid of them. They can go and claim from their COVID disaster payment. Any employee that's arm's length can claim a COVID disaster payment, whether you're a sole trader or whatever, as long as they're arm's length. So remember, you as a sole trader are definitely not arm's length. You as a director of a company aren't necessarily arm's length either. So then you've got to look at, the 40% of money that you're going to get. So say that your amount that you're going to get is $3,000 a week. When you get that $3,000 a week, there's only certain things you can spend that money on. So business operational costs, rent, and wages that you're still paying. Less, but you can't pay wages if you're already getting the wages money from Services Australia. So this is where you've got to make sure that you're thinking about, well, what money am I actually physically paying out? So make sure you've still got the expenses going through your books, because if you don't, you can't claim the business support payment. So Sandy says agrees it's ridiculous, so you can't switch over. Yeah, like I said, that's a policy thing, which when I pointed out the scenario yesterday, they just went, yeah, maybe it's a policy we need to look into. So they have acknowledged that that's not right. Elisa says I'm on a wait list for a callback. Absolutely. There's plenty of people on a wait list for a callback. Unfortunately, a lot of people called too early and the information simply wasn't available. Some people are calling and, like I said, getting different answers because you're not asking the full picture question. So please make sure when you're asking the questions, give as much detail as you possibly can, because if you're not giving the detail, then you won't get the answer. Okay, so you've really got to make sure you've got your ducks in a row. Janine says you're double dipping with JobSaver and disaster payment. No, you're not double dipping if you genuinely have lost 20 hours work. So Janine works in retail. She's genuinely lost 20 hours worth of work or whatever. So as long as you're stood down for 20 hours worth of work, you have stopped paying yourself for those 20 hours worth of work as an employee, then you as an employee did lose that money. So as long as your business is incurring other expenses and you have a shop, so you've got a shop front, you're still paying rent, you're still paying the costs of operational costs, you're still paying your website costs, you're still paying your accountant fees and all that stuff. As long as that gets over the money that you're getting in, that's fine. You can claim both. You can't claim both if you don't need to, like if there's no excuse for it, no reason for it. But as a sole trader, absolutely you would be considered to be double dipping and you're not allowed to do it. Okay, so just see if there's any questions on there. So Marie says, I've been telling my clients to answer as an employee and forget they're a director. Mind you, my clients take a proper wage per the BAS. Yeah, so exactly that, Marie. As long as the client is taking a proper wage through the BAS, through STP, they're doing all that stuff, then, and like I said, as long as they drop their wages, so if they're still paying themselves full wage, they can't claim COVID disaster payment. They must take the cut in wages. Absolutely must do that. So just make sure that that's happening. Cara said, just to clarify, you can claim JobSaver for the 40% wages and then employees can apply for additional reduced hours if you're working part-time instead of full-time. Absolutely. So with your employees, you give them a notice of stand down and you say, we're standing you down. We only want you to work 15 hours instead of 35 or whatever, or 38. Remember, 38 is the full-time amount, not 40, because some people are getting confused over that. So you say to them that as long as they've lost their 20 hours, they can go to Services Australia and claim from Services Australia the 20 hours that they've lost. So that takes the pressure off you. Now, if you choose to continue to pay them some additional money, so if you choose to pay them up to, say, 17 hours, just to make sure you know we're near the threshold of 38, if you pay them 17 and they go for their COVID payment for 20 hours, that's fine. They're okay. It's only where you are crossing lines that you have an issue. Hopefully that answers that, Cara. So yep, they can definitely do both as long as they're not then exceeding what they were getting before. So for instance, a part-time worker, if they were only part-time 14 hours a week, then they can't suddenly claim that they're getting cut back by over 20 hours or anything. So remember, there's two levels for the COVID disaster payment. There's the 8 to 20 hours, or 8 to 19 hours, and then 20 hours and over is the higher payment. So just make sure when you're doing your numbers for yourself and for your employees, you're considering both, okay? So that you're remembering your numbers, okay? So we don't want to screw anyone up or do anything silly, and that's fine. So that answered you. Is there any more questions on this? But basically, the key is when you're communicating, just make sure that you are reviewing your situation properly and that you are answering all the questions, okay? So in the end, you're potentially still going to have to contact Service New South Wales. Like, there won't be any way around that. And you also need to contact your accountant. Now, with the accountants, some of them have been given a toolkit from Services New South Wales. The toolkit effectively is just some additional Q&A type questions. But what I'm finding is that it hasn't been sent out to all accountants. It's been sent to some of the accounting bodies, not all of them. And those accounting bodies may or may not have sent it out to their accountants, their BAS agents, their tax agents. So your accountant may or may not have full information, which is a little bit problematic. Do bear in mind that you only need to get a letter from your accountant in certain situations. So make sure you check the criteria, because some people have to have it because they are alternative circumstances. They have to get a letter. Some don't. So if you don't need a letter, you don't need to contact the accountant necessarily. No, you may want to just check with them and confer with them what's going on. But what I do stress to you, exactly what happened last year, the accountants don't know it all. And I know, for instance, Marie's an accountant. She's on here today. I know another lady's contacted me and suggested accountants have a look at what I'm putting out. Service New South Wales was sharing my post the other day, some of their staff. So they don't know all the information. They don't necessarily have everything available either. So please just bear that in mind when you're talking to people. We're trying our best to try and answer the questions. So the alternative supporting documentation for employing business, e.g. they hired new employees. Okay, so Erin says, do you know what the alternative supporting documentation is for employing businesses, e.g. hired an employee on the 1st of July, so obviously no BAS history. That was your very first employee, Erin? If that was the case, then you're not going to meet the cutoff dates. So what you're probably going to have to do is do it as a non-employing business, unfortunately, because you won't have the numbers. You could try to speak to your accountant or Service New South Wales and explain your scenario, that you had an employee that started before the 13th of July, because 13th of July is the headcount date. So you could still try and get that through and see if they'll approve that, possibly. That's definitely one of the odd situations. The payments for JobSaver, they indicated yesterday they thought that some of them had started going out, but I haven't seen or heard anyone that said that they've got them. So they potentially coming out soon. The people that applied for the COVID business grant, I know some of you only got $10,500. I know, Carla, have you received the other 4.5? So they got the 10.5, and the 4.5 was delayed while they were checking things, etc., because the extra 4.5 had some additional terms on it that were required, and they were paying them separately. But what they're doing now is the full 15,000 is actually being paid in one hit. So that's interesting that you haven't, Carla. So I'd chase that up because they're now paying it in one go. So I'm like, I don't know why the people that did it early still are waiting on the second part of the 4.5K. So just make sure that you're following up your situation. So I do an IAS, not a BAS, as I'm a sole trader, and I only earn about 10% of what I would normally earn in July. So unfortunately, Barbara, as a sole trader, sole traders are currently only allowed to claim one or the other. So if you haven't claimed COVID disaster payments, you are far better off going for the micro grant. If you are the micro grant is kind of either or, but if you haven't claimed the COVID disaster payment, you're better off going for the micro grant because you can backdate that to 26th of June if you're effective from 26th of June. But with the COVID disaster payments, they've got weekly cutoffs. So the first weekly cutoff is already passed. So you would miss out on that first payment. So definitely go for the business support grants rather than the other one. And if you are over 75,000, then you'd be eligible for JobSaver, Barbara, but you'd get the lowest amount as a non-employing business. So you would apply for that one. Erin says, is a decline in turnover calculated based on how you report BAS cash versus accrual? Yes, it is, Erin. So that has come up a few times in like Tradie Wives and stuff like that. So basically, if you report your BAS as cash, then you have to do your calculations as cash. If you report your BAS as accrual, you have to do your calculations as accrual. And some people are going, oh no, I've missed out, blah, 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 because I got a payment. I'm like, no, you haven't missed out. So what's happening is, say, for instance, a tradie. So a tradie's been shut for the last 2 weeks, and say on Tuesday last week, they got a payment in. That was, from months ago, but they received a payment last Tuesday. And they're going, oh, no, I can't claim for it because of the last 2 weeks. But okay, you got that payment, but you've just done no work for 2 weeks. So when would that normally get paid? Maybe not till next Thursday or Friday or whatever, you're going to get another payment from anybody. So therefore, you still would have a 2-week period. You're just going to ignore those first few days and go for a 2-week period. So please bear in mind that a lot of people that are bleating about, I'm not going to get anything because payments came in late, just make sure that you're not writing yourself off, because a lot of people are writing themselves off and saying, oh, we can't get anything. It's like, yes, you can. Just give it a few more days and let yourself see. Because remember, it's only 30% down. So if you're a tradie or a hairdresser or whatever, when you're 100% down, like you've got no work coming in, you're not invoicing anybody, then clearly a 2-week period with only 30% down has got to be possible. You're not receiving all of these payments suddenly from all the past. It should be, everything's delayed, everything's flowing through. It should happen. So just make sure you please check it. So Rebecca, the grant, okay, so I really wish they hadn't used these terms. They're really dumb terms because it's confusing people. The COVID business grant was the first thing that was put out for businesses over 75,000. For that one, it was initially said that you had a date range for the 2 weeks of 26th of June to 26th of July, but they always said that that particular grant was only there for the first 3 weeks. So it was only for people affected by the first 3 weeks. Tradies, in the most part, were only affected from week 4. So they shouldn't have been eligible for the first 3-week grant. That was why they changed the date, which is really sucky for the people that actually genuinely were shut earlier. And now they, because of their cash flow situation, yes, there is a few people that will miss out on that particular grant, which does suck. But the tradies in there, honestly, most of them weren't entitled to it anyway because they weren't affected in the first 3 weeks. Bear this in mind that, again, I mentioned earlier about this, that putting this stuff in place is complicated and long and hard to do. And so what they did was they put a grant in that was something quicker and easier to do. They didn't have to worry about fluffing around about, what people's wages were and what the headcount was and all this complexity. They put in something simple quickly. Well, supposedly quickly, but as we know, it took a bit of time to get out there. But it was in there quickly, which meant that they put it out. And so because obviously the lockdown went longer than they first thought, they've had to then cut the date back to make sure that they kept it to only that first 3 weeks. So tradies are entitled, like everybody else, if they were over 75,000, to JobSaver. So just bear in mind, if you're under 75,000, micro business grant is yours. If you are over 75,000, then you've got the COVID business grant plus JobSaver. Okay. So just bear that in mind. It's a different scenario for each person. But please, tradies in that, stop going on, we missed out on the grant because they changed the date. You were never entitled to the grant if you weren't affected in the first 3 weeks. Now, I know some tradies were because they're, the people that were working from that had pulled jobs and stuff like that. But most tradies were only affected from week 4. Therefore, they were never entitled to that grant. Okay, so that was why the date was changed. So hopefully that makes that clear. Okay, so I think that's all the questions so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this video. I'll put it up on YouTube and put it on my page that I'm keeping all the details on. So please keep referring to that page because I do make sure I keep it updated as good as I possibly can because this situation is horrible. It keeps changing all the time. I know you guys are stressed. For God's sakes, I'm stressed. Not helped by the fact I found out I've got this anemia thing. So I have to get blinking shots in my arm and stuff now. So that was awesome. Good timing in the middle of all this crisis. But anyway, so just make sure that you're please not writing yourself off. Please, if you get a no from either an accountant or Service New South Wales, just double check that again because it might not be a no. And it might be if you rephrase the question, you might get a yes. So particularly when you think you've looked into it, look into all the nitty-gritty details of why you think it's a yes, and then make sure you go, okay, but this is my scenario. Okay, I have dropped 20 hours. I'm not paying myself for those 20 hours. Really get specific, and then hopefully you'll get the answer that you should have gotten in the first place. Yeah, I do try and put it in plain language, so I do hope that this is done. And as Marie said, okay, part of this is I have voluntarily and completely, no cost to anyone doing this in my own time because I'm just so frustrated about, the answers not being out there. And that's why I do it. So, and I know the accountants completely rushed off their feet, which is crappy for them, good in one respect, bad for others. And I just want to also just mention again about the letter. I know I've put it on my page. I've mentioned this previously, but the accountant's letter, if you are requiring those, bear in mind they will come at a cost, okay? And the accountants have every right to charge you for those letters. If it's a straightforward letter, really, really straightforward, because the accounting information is all in zero or whatever, and they just have to press a few buttons, then that should be a very cheap letter, okay? A few $100s or whatever is fine. I've heard some people have been quoted a flat rate of $1,000. That's not fair if it's straightforward. However, if it's complicated, they've got to do a whole bunch of special numbers and they have to go and compare stuff all sorts of different periods. That, maybe they're earning their money. So just bear that in mind. You will have a fee for these accountants' letters and it's totally expected that you would. So please, don't bark at your accountants or whatever. They're doing their job too. But do question them if you think the fee seems a little bit exorbitant. So if they're charging you $1,000, $1,200 for a letter, just say to them, can you just let me know, what actually that is for, because they might say it's worth, 5 hours of their time. That they might say, if they can't justify it, then don't do it. So the thing with Service New South Wales as well, some of you are waiting contact from them for things that they still don't have answers to. Once they do, then you're basically triggered to be called. So some of you will still be on the callback list. Do also remember that the service line is open 24/7 at the moment, so you can try them at a different time of day and just see if you're getting better responses. Where on MyGov do we find the micro business grant? Don't even going through MyGov. Just follow the instructions on the Service New South Wales site is probably the easiest thing to do. So I'll just quickly, this is the page on my website. So what I've done is I've put links in here. So all of these bits that are in purple are all clickable. So if you click on that, it's going to jump down to the impacted industry list bit of information. So just to let you know about that, there was some issues with ABNs. So if you're having those kind of issues, there were 2 issues. One was just a glitch in the system, and the other one was where you're not registered for GST. Sometimes that actually does cause a problem. The third scenario is that where your ABN has actually expired. Sometimes they cancel ABNs. So just be really careful that your ABN hasn't actually been cancelled. So doing some quick checks like that before you contact Service New South Wales, or just save that waste of time phone call, so that you've got information there. Then I've said what you're eligible for based on the size of your turnover. And obviously, like I said, I'll put this video on there so that will be available too about the director stuff. And I'll also just put a little summary like this. So the alternative circumstances, we do have the new business one. So as I said, some of the accountants received a toolkit yesterday, which I believe was meant to include some of the information, but it hasn't all been, unfortunately, put out publicly yet. I was told by Service New South Wales some stuff had been put up on the website, but when I looked before, I couldn't see it. So I'm not quite sure whether it was still going through a checking process, quite possibly. Just check back. They are meant to be adding some information to the website about some of the alternative application stuff. So just make sure you check there or check with your accountant. They hopefully have additional information. I'll just double check if I can see. Yeah, so they still don't have the full information. So I just want to point out, this is where you go to. So in the guidelines, there is a part in here, part 6, I think it is. Part 6, evidence in support of eligibility. So what you can do is look here and see that the alternative circumstances area. And there is some information in there, and they're going to add to that, I believe. Okay, so just make sure that that's in there. Cool. Glad that you found that, Barbara. So yeah, just check the alternative circumstances. Don't forget about that one, because a lot of people seem to be forgetting about the alternative circumstances. They're saying, I'm a new business, I don't get it. And it's like, yes, you do. You do. Seriously, you only have to be started by the 1st of June to actually be eligible potentially. So they've just got to agree what period you need to compare your numbers to. If you are a growing business, you started out in 2019 or thereabouts, and you started, but it was a really slow year to start with, and then you've grown since, like I know a number of my customers have. They've done good things. They've grown their business. So all you need to do is get a different period to compare with. So again, at the moment, we have to contact Service New South Wales to do that, but they're hopefully releasing information that they have agreed with KPMG, which they're putting out there. So that will come in. The receipt thing, as I said, except for the grant, which may make you ineligible for the grant, but things like JobSaver, honestly, you should still be able to get the grant, because you just got to look at a later 2-week period. So you should be fine. The employing business things mentioned there. And then I've got some other things like the application submission error. If you got that, it does save your application, so you should be okay. So the different pages you can go to, there's a New South Wales page, which has a summary. So nsw.gov.au. You can go there and get that, and I will add that into the website just for completeness. And it has a list of all the places you can go for all the information that's out there. We do have things like this. So I just wanted to point out, this is where it says, you have lost hours of work and income due to a lockdown in your state and don't have any appropriate paid leave entitlements. I did just want to mention that. The appropriate paid leave entitlements does not include annual leave, okay? So there is the page that clicks through to, and it says leave entitlements. Leave that's not included is things like annual leave, because some people are concerned they have to pay out annual leave before the person can get the COVID disaster payment, but that's not true. So you just need to check. Like I said, most of the information's there. You just need to look for it and check it. Then there's these documents. So I'm going to add these again as links on my website, or so you can access them. But there's things like this one here, support for the construction industry, which again just goes through a bit more of the detail. But it's basically the same stuff I've already put out there, again, just in a slightly different format, but I'll make those available to you. And then obviously for all of them, you've got the apply section, and obviously you've got the apply online thing. But at the bottom of all of these grants, remember you've got this bit down here, which has got the terms and conditions and the guidelines and some FAQs. So do make sure you check those. Make sure you've read those before you contact Service New South Wales, because a lot of the phone calls going to Service New South Wales just don't need to be going there. And if that we can stop the, calls that don't need to go there, then hopefully we'll get the ones that do need to go there sorted out. So that's that. Elisa, for information for anyone needing additional help, I was also eligible for the small business fees and charges rebates, $1,500. Yeah, I've got that on my website, Elisa. So things like license fees, rates, electricity, etc. Have a look. So there is a massive list of things on there. One thing I would suggest, particularly for construction and cleaning businesses, for instance, if you pay the long service leave levy, that is one that you can get back. So there'll be a number of you in that case. If you had any waste fees or anything like that, you'll be able to get back. Any DA type stuff, there's a whole bunch of things in there. So Lisa's completely right. As I said, it's mentioned on my site here. You can jump through to small business fees and charges rebate, and there's a section in here about it. So please make sure you do check that, and do remember that the money that you receive out of the grants or JobSaver cannot be used to pay those, because you should be claiming those under the small business fee rebate. Do remember to keep records of everything like normal, to make sure that if you ever get audited, you can get the answer back. So that is that. So please make sure you do review your situation, contact Service New South Wales, and contact your accountant if you need to. And just a reminder, I do what I call tea time tips, which are on LinkedIn and Facebook like this is. And basically they're just short videos, training videos and different things. So earlier this week, I did one on LinkedIn. It's about communication and using the little video features that a lot of people don't know about. I did one on reducing expenses. So please check that out if you are in a dire situation, because there's a lot of things you can do. So I've had people say, I think Lisa was one that she turned out she contacted her electricity supplier and realized that she'd actually was in advance on her electricity, so she didn't have to pay anything for a while. I've had people say that one person approached her landlord and she got rent-free for a month. They don't have to offer that, but they did. So things like that. The banks are all doing deferrals. So please make sure, if you want some ideas for saving some money, check out that one, Reduce Expenses. And then there is a 30-page guide that goes with it with 74 ways you can save money. If you do need help, please contact Service New South Wales or your accountant about this particular topic. If you do need other business support and advice, though, I am an advisor, as I said, with Business Connect. So you can reach out to me through that program. I also do a lot of group training, webinars, etc. So please reach out to me and I can help you. So thank you for that, guys. Went a bit longer than intended, as usual, because I tend to talk too much. Hopefully we've answered all your questions. If you've got any more, just hashtag replay, chuck them in, and we'll get them answered. But hopefully that is clarified for you. So just remember, you've got to look at your scenario. Sole traders, it's got to be one or the other. For a director of a company, if you're paying yourself as a wage, then you can potentially claim as an employee. But do make sure that you have got that cut in hours and it is clear to see, so that it is obvious that, yes, you are entitled to make that claim. Okay. So thank you for catching up today. Thank you for coming on, you guys, and asking questions and things. And good luck, and fingers crossed that everyone gets what they deserve and we all get out of this as soon as possible, because seriously, aren't we getting over this? Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. I know many of you are stuck within 5Ks of home. Yeah, at least enjoy yourself. Hopefully there's some good fresh air. It's a beautiful day. Get outside right now and enjoy your backyard or whatever. Okay, catch you guys later, guys. Bye-bye.